everyone, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for watching. We have a great show in store for you. But before we get to that, the U.S. military released footage of a Black Sea drone incident with the Russian jets. If you remember, the U.S. military was saying that the Russian jets were acting aggressively towards the drone. They claimed that they sprayed fuel on it and ultimately collided with the drone, damaging it, forcing it to plunge. And yesterday on this show, we spoke with the Russian UN ambassador, Dmitry Polyansky, who said the accusations were not accurate, that the drone was flying in Russian airspace, headed toward Crimea, and that their fighter jets did not make contact with the drone. Now let's take a look at the footage. So here comes the Russian fighter jet. That is fuel being sprayed. And the U.S. military did say that they had lost communication with the drone for a period of time and that they did edit the video for time. But here's the second jet. Reportedly, there were two jets. And you can see the fuel that was being dropped on the jet. But now they're going to have another pass at it, it looks like. Here comes the other one. And this one seems to be the one that potentially caused whatever however, we don't see a collision happening. That is not what we're seeing from this footage. But we do see here in the footage, when it continues on after they'd lost contact with it, that the propellers had in fact been damaged. Are we getting the rest of this footage here? When it gets to the second, there it is. And you could see that bent propeller there. And then let's go ahead and look at the images. So the propellers were damaged from that. So the Russians actually released, you can see there that bent propeller. The Russians originally released a video of the drone. They flew by the drone. They took imagery of that drone. They released that. The drone was fine. Here it is. You can see the propellers were fine. When you actually slow down that video, you actually see that the propellers are straight and everything's fine. With the footage then that the U.S. military released, you can see the Russian fighter jet acting aggressively the way that the U.S. military said. I know it's kind of like trying to believe Chicken Little, because we often hear the sky is falling from the U.S. military, and we never then see real evidence of it. So it's rare when actually they release the evidence and they say, no, see, we're telling the truth this time. And this time, it does look like the U.S. military was actually telling the truth. The Russian jets were very Top Gun. This is like pretty impressive flight maneuvering by the Russians, quite honestly. But they were definitely harassing the drone. The drone was being dumped. Fuel was being dumped on the drone. The big question is then, what caused the propeller damage? So we cannot see anything in the footage that actually shows how the propellers were damaged, but we can see from the images after that one propeller was bent, and it does look like a second propeller was kind of twisted. It's supposed to be a little bit more flat. It looks like it was a bit twisted, like maybe it turned like 90 degrees or something. So we can see that the drone was damaged. We now also know that the drone has been found by the Russians near Crimea in 900 meters of depth in the Black Sea. Now, the Black Sea has a depth of about 2,700 meters. And you can see here where Crimea is in the white up there. That red area actually is that's shallower water, more shallow. The dark blue is deeper water for the Black Sea. The fact that the drone was found in 900 meters of depth shows that it was in that kind of green area that you can see around. The green outline is around that level of depth, according to these maps. So it was pretty close to Crimea. So it looks like when we do an assessment, kind of a post-mortem now, what both sides were saying, and now the footage that we see, in this particular instance, it looks like they both were somewhat telling the truth, right? The U.S. military was being honest. They were saying that Russian jets were flying aggressively around our drone, spraying fuel on it. The collision, that's unclear. It could be that because the Russians say, look, there was no collision, otherwise our fighter jets would have had damage. That's obviously true. So what caused the propellers to bend? Possibly when they were dumping the jet fuel at that rate of speed. It could be, the heaviness of the fuel at that rate, sort of like hitting water at a high rate of speed versus just jumping into a swimming pool. When you hit water when you're falling from the sky and hit it at a high rate of speed, it's like cement. Versus if you just jump into a pool, you're going to jump in and go swimming. So it could have that same effect. Perhaps, I don't know, I'm just speculating when it comes to the releasing of the jet fuel. Perhaps when it got too close to the drone and it released the jet fuel, it did have enough force that it could impact the propeller and bend it without the fighter jet ever making contact with the drone. So it's possible that the Russians, when they say we didn't make contact with it, they're being accurate. We don't have any evidence of an actual collision itself. We do see, however, that the Russians were flying aggressively around the drone and the propeller is bent, and now the drone is in the water and the Russians are retrieving it. We also know that the Russians consider the area where the drone was flying, they consider that their airspace. They are at a war with a country that the U.S. is openly and actively supporting. And, here we are pretending like we're not really at war, but we're in a proxy war. The Russians know it. Everybody knows it. And so a drone flying that close to Crimea is obviously a provocation on Russia. Russia viewed it as a provocation. They took action in a way that assumed it was a provocation. It looks like they took the drone down without firing anything at it. They found a creative way to use turbulence or whatever it was in order to take the drone down. That does look like that is what happened. They were attempting to take it down. They did successfully take it down, and they took it down near Crimea. So that's saying both sides in this look like they're both telling somewhat of the truth about this. Now, reports are coming out that U.S. is assessing drone ops over the Black Sea, that there was another drone, a similar drone that operated the similar path and the same mission shortly after this incident. That drone did not have any interaction with Russian jets. There was no incident with that other drone. The U.S. is now assessing whether or not it's a good idea to be doing these drone ops near Crimea that close, because it does look like the U.S. military is trying to de-escalate with Russia. Surprising, actually, isn't it? We've just been so used to them marching us towards war. But the fact that they're actually now saying, okay, we'll reassess whether or not it's a good idea to be flying these missions that close to Crimea. Maybe it's not such a good idea. We do want to de-escalate. It does kind of lend to the idea that a lot of this is just about making money for the military-industrial complex. They're looking to make a bunch of money. They want to ship a bunch of weapons to Ukraine. They're happy to use Ukrainians as cannon fodder. Nobody really wants NATO troops to go into war. Nobody really wants U.S. troops to go into battle and come back in body bags. And so instead, this is a money-making scheme. This is a money-making operation. They're happy to send all the money, the equipment, and everything to Ukraine. But they don't really want to actually go to war. And the fact that they're trying to de-escalate after this aggression, Perhaps that's the truth, that we're really not intending on going to war. We're just pretending to go to war, all for making money, because there is big money in that. Look, it is common for jets to go in near each other's airspace. There was an incident in 2020, several incidences in 2020, where Russian bombers were very, very close to the Alaskan border. There was the ADIZ zone around the United States is about 200 miles. And the actual airspace is about 12 miles out, but the ADIZ zone is about 200 miles. And in 2020, Russian bomber jets were found only 8 miles from that 12-mile mark. That happened a few times in 2020. And so, look, everybody kind of at some point provokes one another. China flies their jets in what Taiwan considers to be their ADIZ zone. This stuff happens. What doesn't typically happen, though, is the aggression towards whatever the jet is. The bomber jets, the United States did not aggressively go after the Russian bombers when they were coming really close to the United States border. Same thing with China and Taiwan. No one really interfered, but everybody goes. Usually what happens is after an incident like this is they take to the podium and they say, how dare you? Don't fly so close to us. Get out of here. And in this case, the Russians definitely did do a bit more than what we've seen typically, except the United States shooting out of the sky a bunch of Chinese weather balloons. So that is, maybe there's a precedent that is being set there, not clear. But obviously, what has happened is that Russia is sending a signal to the United States that we view you as a hostile entity at this point. You're hostile. We think you're hostile. We believe that we are in a proxy war with you. And for that reason, you should not be flying a surveillance drone this close to our borders. And the United States seems to now be getting that message and is now reassessing whether or not it should be operating those types of surveillance missions that close to the Russian border, or what Russia considers to be its border. There's a dispute over Crimea. So that is where we're at with that. That is the truth of what has happened. And there you have it. Sometimes our military tells us the truth. It's amazing when it happens. I know it's hard for us to believe. And so now when we get video evidence, it's like, wow, okay. Sometimes we're told something and it ends up being the truth. So there you have it. All right, guys, like I said, we do have a great show in store for you. But first, I've got to tell you about the new product I've been using. It is Field of Greens. This is a freeze-dried whole fruits and vegetables that have been made into a powder to make it really easy for you to get all of your fruits and vegetables into your diet so you don't have to go grazing away all day, every day on fruits and vegetables in order to get however many servings we're supposed to get each day. I don't even know. How many of us actually pay attention? We're supposed to know these things, right? Well, Field of Greens makes it really easy for you. You could just get that powder, mix it into some ice water or whatever juice you like, or you could sprinkle it onto food, and you will get your daily dose of all those fruits and vegetables that you need. These are freeze-dried organic fruits and vegetables. They select the right ones for you to ensure that you're going to get all of those nutrients. Just go to fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code Kim to get 15% off your first order.